Okay, so why I went over to the New York Times, they gave me this invitation, and I talked with Steve Krakauer, my executive producer, about it quite a bit. And Abby's funny because she always like gets the incoming. She's like, "Don't do it! Don't do it!" She's like, "They're gonna hate you. You don't want." And she's very defensive of me. But Steve was more like, "Oh, we should consider this one." And we talked about it. And I have a couple of things that we're promoting right now, like our AM update and our expansion into this more podcast network where we're bringing on other voices and trying to promote them. So I thought if I were to do it, this would be a time. And the truth is I listen to The Daily most days, and I talk about The Daily on this show a lot. And I'm a weird fan of the show. Like I love to rip on it, but I do learn from it as well. I think it's a useful podcast. Sometimes it's useful just to bash. Sometimes it actually does provide information. Like I loved the podcast they did on what Trump's tariffs are doing down in Mexico when it comes to fentanyl labs. Like that was actually a fair and balanced piece. And I think they're making an effort to like drop a few here and there that might be a little more acceptable to Trump fans. In any event, I figured I would do it. So I was asked to sit down with Lulu Garcia Navarro, who is a legit reporter. She's been all over the world covering actual news for the New York Times and other outlets for many, many years. And I didn't know her very well. I knew she'd done J.D. Vance, and she seemed fair with him. So I figured, all right, here we go. And Michael Barbaro is the host of the one Monday through Friday. And truth be told, I kind of like him. And we have a friendly relationship. We're not friends, but friendly. So in any event, I decided to go over there. So it was 90 minutes sitting down together in the New York Times building. And then it was another, I don't know, half an hour or 45 minutes the next day after you've had a time to reflect. Which is kind of funny. Even that is kind of leftist, right? We're going to reflect and then we're going to chat again. So we went over to the New York Times building, guys, and it was very fun just walking in there. I have to say they were very nice. They were very polite. They treated me well. But, there are all these heads at the New York Times like, whoa. Right? So I'm walking through like.
Is that Megyn Kelly?
Yes, and then you could hear all the like, whoosh, 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 like after we weren't even on the main floor. We were just all like on the podcast floor, but everybody did like a 180. It was very funny. And the one guy, sort of the handler who was dealing with me before Lulu came in, said, Lulu, she often takes people up into like the heart of the newsroom when the interview's over and introduces them to people. So she might do that with you. Let's just say that didn't happen. There was no tour of the New York Times newsroom. It was a no. I appreciate that. Why would she want to do that? Why would this gains Lulu zero street cred in walking through the New York Times newsroom with me? It was fine. But I have to say, I liked her. She was very kind to me, like in terms of our, dealings behind the scenes. She was very nice. You can kind of tell when someone hates your guts and they're about to interview you. I didn't feel that way about her. And the interview itself didn't reflect some, animus on her part or bad faith. I thought, she's, I think, of the left and came at these issues from the left. That was understood and not surprising. But I didn't sit across from her thinking this is someone who can't stand me. And that would have led to a bad interview had I felt that way. So that's why I think it all worked. It came off fine. I was more relaxed in giving her answers, and she was a good interview in terms of saying, like, tell me about that, as opposed to, just trying to hammer me on various things. So in any event, it posted on Saturday. I hope people take a listen to it. We'll talk about a couple of the sound bites and a couple of the outtakes, just because those are always fun to know, what happened. We released a couple on social media over the weekend. And I'll tell you, the biggest divide between Lulu and yours truly, which we talked about, was she didn't understand exactly what it is people like us do. The two women I'm looking at and myself, right? That like we do offer political commentary and we do offer our own opinions, but we also are journalists. But we all exist in this new ecosphere, right? Like we all have podcasts. We all have direct relationships with our audiences. We're all in new media as opposed to corporate legacy media. The Free Beacon is its own entity, but I mean, Eliana does Instinct Wretches and is very honest. In any event, that was where we really kept tripping wires, because she didn't get how I can still call myself a journalist and have endorsed Donald Trump. Which one is that, Steve? Okay, that's number 4, and we'll kick it off with that one.
Well, you interviewed him, and it was a fair interview, a tough interview, but you opened it by saying,
she's talking about Hegseth,
that he was a friend. You said, I've been really dismayed by the amount of pile-on that he's been suffering, and I've been outraged by the unfairness of the media's coverage of the allegations, and that's a direct quote. And so, I'm curious what you're doing in that interview, because you're setting up the interview in a particular kind of way that perhaps it wouldn't be set up in the mainstream media.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I feel like part of our discussion before and today is getting at something that our wires are crossing. Your wires and my wires are crossing in a way. Like, you're kind of looking at me and saying, it's not behaving like a typical journalist. And it is still calling itself a journalist. And I'm trying to say to you, yes, I'm still a journalist.
Understand it.
But I know. I'm not saying you're judging me.
Right.
But I'm trying to say to you, yes, I'm still a journalist, but I'm in this new ecosystem where the old rules don't apply. I'm in this world with, yes, Charlie Kirk and Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro, but my world is also Joe Rogan with these in-depth interviews, and also Theo Vaughn. And it's a very large world, and how the consumer receives it is by going on youtube.com on their television screen or going to the vertical integrations on Instagram or TikTok and just taking in content. What's the content that you want to receive? I'm on the list of content creators. And so the fact that I'm also a journalist who breaks news and reports on news is like an extra. But what's most important in my business now is authenticity, that you are honest with the audience. And really, this is a point we just kept coming back to, where she thinks in a way you can be too honest. If you get on stage with a political candidate and endorse him and tell people you're voting for him and you think they should too, that you've crossed a bridge that burns as you walk across it, and you can never return back over to journalism land. And I just didn't see it that way at all. We had a long debate and a lot of debates about owning one's bias. And she didn't understand, if you own your bias, like, doesn't that sell your soul, basically? That how can the audience then trust you to rip on your own side? And the following soundbite is in that context. Hot one. I think the most serious thing I've heard about him has been the E. Jean Carroll allegation that he sexually assaulted her in a Bergdorf and the women
dressing room. And I don't believe one word of that. There are other women who have said.
I know, I've interviewed some of them. But look, the things I heard were included things like he got handsy on an airplane. Now, I don't know whether that happened or it didn't, but do I find that a deal breaker for a possible politician? Not really. At least I reported on their stories and did them the courtesy of bringing them to air in front of millions of people and let the audience make up its mind. My problem is more with these Democrats who will bury these allegations against their candidates or their candidates' spouses and then play holier than thou when they're looking at Donald Trump.
Do you see yourself as a journalist still? Or would you not describe yourself like that anymore? No, I'm
still a journalist. I mean, I break news all the time. And when I sit with Trump or anybody else in the administration, I ask tough questions. I mean, as recently as September of 23, I interviewed Trump and he got so mad at me, he didn't talk to me for 6 or 7 months. So it's not, look, it's a tough job to do. You have to be able to hit the people you admire. And I do. You know, I've hit them all. Right before the election, I ripped on Trump's Madison Square Garden rally as too brotastic and got specific about why. You have to understand, like, if you haven't sold your soul, you have to be willing to criticize the people, even you, that you admire on your, quote, side. And my owning my bias by going out there on stage with Donald Trump and saying, I'm voting for him and you should too, is a bonus when it comes to my credibility. Now, everybody has zero doubt about where I stand, and they can filter everything I say through the appropriate lens. What typically happens in journalism is they say they have no bias, and then they just work it out in the printed word or on their shows without owning it. But the audience knows it, and it creates a distrust and a divide. Okay, just 2 points as an addendum, and then we'll get into it. So I went on in the one answer, and she did find I have no problem with the way the Times edited the interview. This is not a Ben Smith situation where I just thought he just tried to hammer me for his own reasons. She was very fair. But I just want to say that, and that one answer where I'm like, what I have a problem with is these people who will go after Donald Trump and play holier than thou when covering him, but will bury the allegations against Democrats. And what I said at the end of that, because we have a transcript of it, was like, I didn't see a lot of questions by the Times or anyone else about why Doug Emhoff allegedly wailed on his ex-girlfriend, the one he dated right before Kamala. Where was the deep investigation into whether he fathered a love child with the nanny and why the ambulance came to her home on the night she lost the baby? Nobody cared about that. I've actually reported on both of those stories, which is something about 2 reporters in America can say. And then added just a bit later when she was like, I don't get how you can go out and endorse this guy, understanding he's going to make mistakes, he's going to do things that are wrong, who she says, will have to be criticized because that's the nature of any political leader. And I said, see, to me, it's funny to hear you ask that because I guarantee you my audience is going to laugh at this question because they're going to say that is rich coming from the New York Times, which did more to run cover for Joe Biden than virtually anyone else in media. I don't run cover for Donald Trump. I've ripped on Trump endless numbers of times. I put my record of ripping on Trump up against the record of anybody in the leftist media of running against Joe Biden or calling out his infirmities. Even when Trump was running, one of the reasons why he attacked me after I hosted a presidential debate that he did not participate in is because I raised questions about Trump's mental acuity, and I had noticed he was having some word slips saying the wrong thing about Obama when he meant Biden, World War III when he meant II, and he got mad and he attacked me, which is totally fair game. I am fair game. I'm in the arena and I'm fair game. I'm not above getting attacked by him. I wasn't in 15. I'm not in 25. So to me, it's funny to hear you ask that question because you must not listen to the show that often. You don't go out and buy a life jacket when the boat's already sinking, and you don't buy gold when the economy's already collapsed. Clearly, others are heeding this advice as gold hit all-time highs already this year. It's not too late for you, and you could have Birch Gold help you diversify into physical gold. Birch Gold specializes in helping you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA and physical gold for no money out of pocket. One recent 5-star review said Birch Gold was, quote, knowledgeable, helpful, non-pressure. Get your free info kit on gold by texting the letters MK to the number 989898. There's no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, just text MK to 989898 and let the experts at Birch Gold help you secure your future today with gold. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.